All right. Thank you so much, everyone, for joining us today in saasguru's live webinar with Steven Trumble. We will be now kickstarting the session, and over to you, Steven. You can take over now.
Sure, thanks. So yeah, today we'll go through basically just a little session on creating validation rules users and admins will love. So we'll talk about, I guess, like my thought process when I'm building validation rules and like things you might want to consider. So it's a better experience for you, the next admin who might be working, and so your users have a good time as well. So who am I? I'm a consultant with Blue Engine Solutions, so a firm based out of Washington, DC. I used to be a physiotherapist, so working in healthcare, but been in Salesforce the last couple of years. And yeah, I like using formulas, flows to solve problems. And you might see me, if you're in the Trailblazer community, a bit, I try and answer some questions there to give back. So working through today's session, yeah, like I said, so we'll talk about better validation rules for admins, then for users. And then the whole purpose, what I want to spend most of the session doing is you actually writing the validation rules. So if you've got like no experience at all and you don't know like any idea, feel free to just like talk and chat, and I'll try and give you some pointers. But I figure like normally people learn a little bit more, you know, by doing rather than just listening to me talk for an hour. And then the last bit we'll do is we'll talk about a way that you can bypass your validation rules. So it's often like quite necessary that you want the validation rule to fire for some people, but not other people. So, you know, you might want your managers to get away with it, or you might want your integration user to not be subject to the validation rule, so your integrations won't break. So we'll talk about how I add that into validation rules that need that as well. So to begin, validation rules are just a type of formula. And then so these tips are just relevant for all formulas, but also naturally going to apply to validation rules as well. So when you're writing them, all your functions, so things like if, and, is, pick, val, text, anything like that, case, could have it just to capitalize that. It makes reading them a lot easier. Next one is to write on multiple lines. So sometimes, you know, if it's a really simple, really basic validation rule, you can get away with doing it just on the one line, but usually it's going to be easier for your eyes and, you know, whoever's maybe has to edit it one day if you break it onto multiple lines, and if you can use indentation. The next one I've got is to include comments. So the notation for a comment in Salesforce formulas is a slash, a star, then you type what your comment is, and then you close it off with a star and then a slash at the end. And so this won't impact your compile size limit or anything like that, but it'll just mean, especially if you got a much more complicated formula, you can just put a little explainer in, you know, why I'm checking if this field is empty or not empty, or, you know, why we're choosing, you know, to see if these fields are equal, not equal over a certain value. And then the last one I've got is you might want to consider using an extension. So the basic Salesforce formula, like user interface, it's not very good. So you can't do indentations, for example. And, you know, it's one of the tips I just said you should do, because it does help a lot. And if you go into the Salesforce help articles, they'll show you their formulas with indentations, but then you can't really do it, like unless you hit the space bar. You can't use tabs, basically. So there's a couple which you can do. So I use the Better Salesforce Formula Editor and AI Agent. So it's just a Chrome extension. And then there's another one, Organizer, which does a lot more than just formulas. And so you can use that. But just word of warning, don't use both. They don't like interact nicely. So if you've got Organizer installed, like that'll don't install the formula editor. But if you don't use Organizer, I think the Better Salesforce Formula Editor has a nicer layout, nicer interface. And then basically all these come down to the general tips is just make it readable, because it's, you know, a bit of a different language. So the easier it is to read, easier you'll understand. So coming down now, specific tips for the admins. So I'll see this a lot, people using an if statement. And so typically there's no need for an if statement in a validation rule. So validation rule, like think of it just like a checkbox. It's a Boolean statement. You're going to return true or false. And then so I'll see people, you know, write something like this, that if amount is null, true, false. And this will work but there's just no need for it because we can just shorten it to just amount equals null. And then already from here, we'll be able to tell whether there's a value in the amount field or not. And this will give us a true or false outcome. So we can just shorten it a lot. So if you have an if function and you're returning true and false, usually just a waste of time and space. Good idea to get into a habit of a naming convention. So the typical format I use is the object that you're on, just, a 2-3 letter abbreviation and then a number. Typically, you should only probably need 1 or 2 digits here because you don't want to have excessive amount of validation rules on there, and then a basic description of what the rule is doing. So what this could look like is, op01, closed loss needs reason, con01, full mailing address. So I know that my contact, my first validation rule on there needs a mailing address. This can help with sorting through the list because you get this like natural alphabetical order, op01, op02, op03. And then the next part of this is using an error code. So when the validation rule fires, I'll put this naming convention as the first bit of the error code. So it'll say op01, hey user, make sure you fill in the closed lost reason when you're coming through there. And then so if your user's having an issue straight away, or if you're getting error logs or something, it's a lot quicker just to be able to see, oh, I'm dealing with op07, that's where the issue is, and you can dive straight into the validation rule you need to look at. The other one I've got up here is called the KISS principle. So I'm not sure if you're familiar with the acronym, but basically just means keep it simple, stupid. So just try and split your validation rules out, and then you can get a much clearer error message. So rather than, for example, say if when an opportunity moves to closed won, you need to have values in 6 different fields. Rather than just building one big validation rule, checking every single one, if your user's missing one of those fields, you're going to have a very generic error message at the top of the screen. And then that's a little bit harder. And then, you'd have to write a rule, make sure you've got a value in this field, and this field, and this field, and this field. And it can be a little bit confusing. So if you split that out, and then the user will know, oh, I'm missing a value just in this one field, and the error message can be right on that field. So it's a little bit simpler for everyone. And then if down the line, that field is no longer required, you can just deactivate a single validation rule rather than having to change a whole formula, make sure all the logic still works, and do all the testing. So it can save you extra time there as well. Another thing, so this is kind of coming again for what as an admin you should be considering, and it's also going to impact the user experience. So whenever you're building a new validation rule, like in an org that already has data in it, there might be records which don't meet the new standard. So the validation rule, has probably come about because, you were missing information. The users weren't putting things in when they should, and now you want to force that to happen. But what could happen is if you bring this in, you're going to have, thousands, tens of thousands, millions of records which might not meet the new standard. And you don't necessarily want these validation rules to fire on those. And then so you can use things like the is new function, is change, or prior value to see that, is the new change to the record, is that actually going to, impact, and we should be telling the user they need to change something, or is it, an inconsequential change? And so one of the ways you can test to see if there are going to be a lot of old impacted records is the first way is you could create a checkbox formula field. And then so once again, to a validation rule is just, you can think of it just like a checkbox, but you can make an actual checkbox. And then you can see, how many run a report, and then how many records do I have where that checkbox is now returning true. And you might see that, it's 10%, 20%, 80%. And this will give you an idea of, how many tickets you might get the next day if your users start getting confused with all these red error messages. And then if SOCL at all, so instead of creating the actual field, you can sometimes just do a query. So you could do, select count ID from contact where, and then this is where you try and write your validation rule. So where amount equals null and, whatever closed loss reason is empty, or whatever it happens to be. But so with both of these, so with the checkbox formula and the SOCL, you're going to have some limitations if your validation rule is using functions like is changed. because that's a valid function in a validation rule, but it's not a valid function in a Salesforce field. But sometimes these like little hacks can work, but not always. Okay, enough of me chatting for now. So what we're trying to do is build a practice one out. So thinking about what we've talked through so far, so try and come up with an appropriate name. And then the description is basically what I want you to do. So we want to check that the contact's phone number begins with a plus sign, like, you know, for a country code. So that's just what we want. And then for your error message, put in your error code, which you'll get from the name that you create. And then, you know, something which explains it. So for example, I've got phone number must begin with a plus or country code sign. So kind of the steps which I'd like you to work through. So first up, just get a very basic validation rule to work. So just see, you know, can we check that the phone number actually begins with a plus sign? And then we're gonna try and edit it so it'll only work for new contacts. And then we'll edit it so it'll work when the phone number changes. And then we'll see if there's any other issues which might arise. And, you know, if we're missing a testing step in here.
Hey, hi, Stephen.
Hey.
Nidhi here, and I had a question. So this pretty much looks similar to a kind of, you know, when you write an acceptance criteria for some functionality or a user story, usually. This pretty much looks in the similar format.
As in how I've written this slide, do you mean?
Yeah, so kind of, you know, you name the validation rule, right? The name you decided for the validation rule. Then the description describing, you know, what does it validate? Basically, it validates the contact's phone number, which begins with a plus sign for a country code. And the error message should be like, this is the part I did not get, like error code.
Okay. Yeah. So if we come into contact, have you built a validation rule before, Nidhi?
I did, but I am not so hands-on with it.
Okay, sure. So when you're in Object Manager and in contact, so validation rule will be just down the bottom here. Yeah,
and the
so
new one,
a new one. So you see, I've given this presentation before, so I've got some existing. So this is where I was saying, you know, you can write that name. So, you know, the rule name, I'm putting CON because I'm on the contact object, 01. And then I'm just going to put a little V1 on the end just because I've already got.
Yeah, you've already created one. Yeah, okay,
yeah.
got it.
And then so through here, so this is basically where I'm saying, you know, you're going to have your name, your description, and your error message. So that's what I'm trying to
No, I just wanted to know, like the error message is the message that should contain the name of the rule.
Yeah, so I just like, you know, put that, you know, con 01 at the start, and then I just paste the rest in here. And then so this is what the user will see. They'll just see like contact 1, phone number must begin with country code.
Or if you do not give a plus and country code in the brackets, it will throw an error. That is what it is.
Yeah, that's what we're trying to do.
And also, when you were explaining on the formula editors or the one Chrome extensions we can use, you mentioned 2 of them, right? One was the organizer and the other one was a Salesforce formula editor, right?
Correct. So this is, if you can see my screen now, this is the view you can get.
So, so which one do you recommend the most?
It depends. So like I really like this one, better Salesforce formula editor and AI agent. But there's a lot of people who are really big fans of Organizer. And so they use Organizer, you know, not just for formulas, but for a lot of the other functionalities it does. But I find like I use multiple different extensions, and then I can do like nearly everything Organizer does. But yeah, I don't use Organizer. So
Yeah,
over the
so
screen.
but both cannot go hand in hand, right? If you have organizer as well as Salesforce editor, it wouldn't work. Functionally, it wouldn't
Yeah,
work well, right?
yeah, functionally, yeah. So I've experienced where like the whole screen will freeze up and it won't work properly, and I've had a few other people report the same. So I just try to let people know,
I
kind
I
of pick
assume I've
one camera.
already because I assume I already have downloaded organizer for some other functionality. So now if I try to download or add in
Yeah.
Salesforce, it wouldn't work. Salesforce formula editor, right?
No, no. So yeah, just use organizer, because organizer will still allow you to do tab indentations, and it'll do some of the text highlighting. So it does, 80%, 90% of what better formula does. Like it does the main things.
Okay. And the validation rules that I have worked with are very basic ones, and I did not use the backslash and all
The
of that,
comments.
this.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's okay. And then honestly, like if you're like I had
Zoom
in that
on.
slide,
WhatsApp audio.
the KISS principle, keep it simple. So sometimes, if you've got a good description in here, you don't necessarily need to do an inline comment, but there's going to be, other formulas which aren't as simple as a basic validation rule. And then that's where inline commenting can be really useful when you're like splitting up, like a 12 line. Yeah.
Sorry, I missed the last part of what you said because of some
Okay.
glitch.
Stone glitch. Yeah. So what I was saying is that often your validation rules will be quite simple, and you won't necessarily need to have inline commenting. But sometimes your formula fields, they can be a bit more complicated, where you're looking across multiple objects and taking in lots of different conditions, and that's where inline commenting becomes a lot more beneficial.
And would you suggest putting in multiple validation rules instead of putting a complex one in one?
Yeah, I mean, it's a trade-off, because the more validation rules you have, it's going to be longer save time, because validation rules, like in your order of operations, are going to be like one of the very first things triggered. And so you don't want to, have like 50 validation rules on an object. It's just crazy. But also you don't want to have something which is, too generic, and then like the user doesn't know where they should go on the page layout or what they should be doing next. So it's trying to find that like nice balance. Yeah. But like typically if it's, like they've got to change just the one field, like if you can get it down to that, that's good, because then you can have the error location that's a bit down at the bottom. So rather than on the top of the page, if you can put it, to the phone, like exactly where the problem is, you can direct the attention right there.
So this is what you meant when you said the KISS formula?
Yeah, yes, that's just an acronym. So keep it simple, stupid. Just yeah.
Okay.
Got
it.
Yeah, so got a Wikipedia page. All right. Cool. So I got one formula in here. So Parul's shared one. I'm gonna put it in. And then if anyone else has a formula they're happy to share, we can have a look at that as well. But or if anyone, based on this, if they notice anything that they do different or that we need to change.
Oh, looks like there is an error.
There is, but what's the error? So this is one of the reasons I really like the better formula, because you'll see the parentheses, they'll show you where the pair is.
I don't have the org open, so I just wrote it on Notepad++, and I think so.
Okay.
I missed the parenthesis somewhere, I guess, maybe, or maybe a comma. That's I guess parenthesis is the one which is missing. A one.
Yeah, so it's this.
In the last. Yeah, I need one in the last.
Yeah. Okay, cool. And then so once again, so if I was in like simple formula here, and if I hit the tab keys, if you see where my cursor is focused, If I hit tab,
Yeah.
then it'll take me down to here. Whereas in better formula, if I come in, then on the line, I can just tab across and fit things in a little bit nicer.
Does it do the indentation on its own, like, or we need to do it? I know the
You
tabs
need to
don't
do it,
work in
yeah.
the normal simple formula. I just
Yeah.
used to copy paste from the Notepad++.
Yeah. So you need to do it. But if you copied it
Yeah.
from Notepad++, I think it's just because you put it in Zoom chat, you probably lost the
Yeah.
formatting.
Yeah. But this
Cool.
this was not something I was aware of. This is just better utility. Yeah. Directly writing over here.
Cool. And then so the next bit, which once again is going to come, because you're not in the org, but so phone number is not the API name. So
Okay.
we can start typing phone, and then this will show me all the different phone fields on contact automatically.
Oh,
If you don't have one of these
nice.
tools, then that's where you want to go insert fields,
Yeah.
and then you can.
But you can't do a search over here. You have to like manually drop down and like select the field.
Correct. Yeah. Good. And then so again here, so for readability, we were talking about before. So the functions, we want them capitalized.
Okay.
And then okay. And then so here, once again, this kind of comes down to personal preference. So the exclamation mark is like looking at the reverse. So it's a not, basically. So some people do like to have this. My preference, once again, like your way isn't wrong, but I prefer to write the actual word. I just find, having as much, English, like actual written language for me, makes it a little bit easier. So this way will work fine. Another way, well, we could try. So if we comment this out, and then you can see if so left function, and then we can look at phone. Yeah. So left, then you can enter the field and then how many letters you want to get from the left side of the field. So I just want to look at what the very first letter is, and then I can say this is not equal to or not equal to, the same thing, whatever you like. And then you could write a plus that way as well. So once again, it's just kind of like what makes more sense for your brain? What does it begin with? Or what's on the leftmost there? Same idea, but you don't need that. Try this out. And then the next bit we've got is looking or, so either it's new or if we change the phone number. So let's make sure this is active. We'll say, and then we can test this out. Does anyone else have anything different that they've written so far? Let's try and create a new one. All right, and then let's save. So getting phone number must begin with country code. That looks good. Put a plus in. No error message. We delete it, what happens? And we can delete it as well. So pretty good. Any other testing you think we need to check out at this point?
I have a question here.
Yeah.
So although you put the plus sign, which validates this rule, and followed by some numbers, but it isn't exactly a phone number, right? It's just it isn't a phone number. So if we want to give it a rule where it says, it should be a proper phone number, say a country code along with 10 digits or, total of 10 digits. So there has to be a validation rule mentioning that. This was only for the country code, right?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So you're right. So like in phone, I can put in letters and things there. So changing out.
Yeah,
And
so
then
this ideally isn't a correct I mean, phone number. You can put a plus sign and you can write USA, you can write India, whatever you want to write, and then that wouldn't be the correct number, right, for the contact?
Yeah, that's right. That's right. And then so like what you're alluding to, which is a bit too advanced just for this talk, but there's a function called regex, and then it's for regular expressions. And then so there's a Salesforce function for regex, and there's a whole bunch of like online boards and things you can do to learn. And so this is where you can write really complicated formulas. So you can say that, I want to make sure that it's a plus sign followed by 10 digits if you're in a country with 10 digits, or if you want the formatting, for example, we want parentheses 202 and then a space and 123, something like that, which is kind of more common what you get in America, or if you want the America plus the thing. Yeah, so you can do that. Yeah, and then so once again in that, then for something like that, I'd probably add that to the same validation rule, because it's still all to do with the phone number, because you're checking a few things. You're like, I want it to begin with a plus sign, and I want it to do that. So you could make a even more complicated, a better rule for regex. But yeah, regex takes a little while to learn, a little hard to explain. So
I got that. So we can use regex to get complex formulas which we want to put it here. So that's understandable. But the thing is, when I talk about your syntax here, when you mention left here, so that specifies that the plus sign should be at the left of the number at the beginning.
Yeah.
So otherwise it can be anywhere and still be verified.
No, so this is what this does is it looks at the phone field, and then we get the one digit on the very left of the phone field, and we're saying, does that equal or not equal a plus sign based on that?
That's what I'm saying. If I don't give this part of the syntax,
so if you wrote 1, 2, 3 plus, it would fail.
Or it will fail, or it will no. If I don't give this, will it still fail if I give 1, 2, 3 plus?
The rule. I mean, we can test this. Let's save this one. So 1, 2, 3 plus. Let's begin with a country code. But we could do something like this, where we've got multiple pluses. So it's still not a real phone number, but we're checking just part of it is working as intended.
Yeah, but if I remove the complete thing, Stephen, I'm talking about if I remove the left part of it, right? That whole line in the syntax, the left phone one, this whole thing, if I remove and I just give the earlier version, right? Not begin phone.
So that's what we did before. So when I've got it, like this, it's commented out. So this isn't doing anything right now.
Oh, okay. So when you do this, this means it is not a part of the code. That is
not a part of the code. Okay. So you can do that.
Sorry, I'm not having any coding background, so for me to understand it takes a bit of time.
Okay, no worries. Thanks for clarifying. So I can put a little comment about my comment that it's not part of the code, not being assessed. So I was just saying, like when I first wrote this, and I think on the Salesforce help article, they used this as the example. So left phone 1, but begins also a valid function. So multiple ways to solve this problem. Okay, let's move on to number 2. So number 2, we're going to be looking at opportunities, and then so here once again pick the name that makes sense for you. And what we are trying to prevent is when an opportunity is closed won, we don't want the stage to be changed again. So we don't want people reopening opportunities. So have a go at that, and then you'll give that kind of few minutes. Why group? So let's talk through this. So there's a few different ways you could have written this. So once again, my preference is to use and the function to come through. And so what we're looking is for this, was the stage name changed? So it was close one. We're trying to change the stage to something else. And now here we're looking at the prior value of the stage name. So all of that wrapped in with the pick list value, and then whether that was close one. So let's try and activate this. Then let's find an opportunity. So this one's in close one. Okay, so you'll see here, because we're using the path, when we get this error message, it'll actually kind of show you up here, but it'll still show you this the field name, like where the error message is. A little bit funny, but if we tried instead from the actual stage field to do something there, then we will get the message where we'd expect, and then also that link to take you, try to focus the vision on there. So that's one way we can do it, just to show you another way we can handle this. So if you don't like using and, the other notation is to use double ampersand. And then so we can do the same thing here. So once again, I recommend, you put this on multiple lines. So some people like to have the double ampersand at the end of the line. Other people you'll see, they prefer to write it, across multiple lines. And then other people like to have something like this. And then, they can add in there next there and the next one. So it's kind of all personal preference. Just whatever makes more sense to you. People who come from more coding backgrounds, sometimes they'll find this is a little bit more similar to what they might have been doing there. As well, we should be able to use different notation rather than using is pick val. We can convert the stage name to text. So I'll try and comment this out. Then I think so. We want the text stage name. And then so here, it's going to be equal to close one. And then all of this, we want to look at the prior value. X to prior value. It's going to be the other way around. How did I have this before? Sorry, it's been a long day staring at the screen. Yeah, text prior value stage name, close one. Oh, I'm missing the and. That's all it is. Okay, so we could do it like this as well. And we save this one. And so coming in, so we're still going to get that same error message, which is good. Okay, so there's lots of different ways you can bypass a validation rule on here. So you'll see lots of different styles. So some people, you know, they're the only admin in the org and they think I'm the only person, or, you know, one super user, and they'll hard code user IDs in. And so this isn't ideal because, you know, it's really hard to read a 15-digit ID number and know who that belongs to. And then when that person leaves, and you've got to update all of the validation rules and test everything again, it's hard. And then people do the same thing for profile IDs. They might say, you know, this shouldn't apply to the system administrator, or this shouldn't apply to the sales manager profile. But again, really hard to read profile IDs. Profiles might change, especially in future with, you know, profiles being replaced by permission sets. So you're going to create a whole bunch of tech debt here. Slightly better than both of those is if you use like a username or the profile.developer name. So that's at least a little bit readable, where you can see, you know, an exception for the system administrator or someone. That can still be a little bit tricky. And then, you know, especially if you're trying to do certain testing and you need to take this in or out, it can be hard to go in and edit all these validation rules or remember where you did or didn't add in that exception. And then more, what I think is kind of the best way to do it, and what Salesforce recommends as well, is using custom permissions and permission sets. And then I've put at the end here, plus or minus a permission set group. So you see what you're wanting is a custom permission. Typically, I just do it per object. So I have a custom permission for contact, a custom permission for opportunity validation rules, a custom permission for account validation rules. And then you'll put each one of those individual permissions in its own permission set, which will be of the same name. And then if there's someone, you know, like an integration user who should be, you know, be able to ignore every validation rule that exists, then you can put all of them in a permission set group, and then you can just assign at the permission set group level. So in your orgs, what I'd like you to do, so you do this either with the contact or the opportunity. We probably just have time for one. So create the custom permission. So, you know, a name like bypass contact validation rules, bypass opportunity validation rules. Then we'll create the permission set. We'll add the custom permission to the permission set. And then if you like, you can create the permission set group as well. And then we'll try and update the validation rules. So, okay, so I'm going to do this for the opportunity. Just going to copy this through. So if you come back into setup, and you can just search for the word custom permissions. And so I've already got that contact validation rule. So now just something basic there. So bypass opportunity validation rules, so the label and the name, brief description. So what it'll do, allow users to do this. And we can save this permission. Now, once you've got your permission, that's where you can search for permission sets. And so I will create a new permission set. And once again, I'm going to use just the same name. So this bypass opportunity validation rules. Let's press tab and you get your API name. And then once again, same description. So it just allows users to bypass. If you want, you can attach a license, but just consider here whether, you know, if this is an integration user, whether they'd be on a Salesforce license or not. So probably safest just to leave it at none, but if it's just going to be for internal users, you can add a license in there. And so once your permission set exists, so this is where we can come down to, in this top app section, to custom permissions. So permissions, access, custom processes, and apps. So in here, then you should get a page similar to this, and you can click edit. And then this is where you'll see all the custom permissions which exist in your org. So I've got my opportunity one now. So I'm going to add that into my opportunity validation rule permission set. Save. So that's all we need to do here. And then, so you don't need to do this, but it can make sense for a permission set group. So a permission set group is just a collection of different permission sets. So I've made one already just with the more generic name of bypass validation rules. And then saying, you know, allows you to bypass all the validation rules in the org where we're going to reference that permission. If I come into this, so I can permission sets in group, have a look here. So my contact one already exists. We're going to add the opportunity. Use bypass opportunity validation rules. Add. Done. Now if we come back to the group, so on either the permission set level or the permission set group level, you'll need to click on manage assignments. And so this is where you want to search, you know, add assignment and then add yourself to here, make sure it's active for the next bit to work. So just pause here just for a minute or so. But yeah, if you can give me a thumbs up in the chat or something when everyone's at this stage, you only need it for one of the objects. So if you've got the contact ready or the opportunity ready. Okay, so now that we've built those custom permissions and the permission set, this is where we can now come in and start changing the validation rule again. So we might want to add in a rule that, you know, this doesn't apply to anyone who's got this permission set assigned to them. So I'm just going to change this back to using and. Okay. So we've got this rule which was going before, and then once again, nice bit about better formula is you can start typing the word permission, and then it'll show you the permissions that exist in your org. But if you don't have that, if you're just using the standard simple formula, you can use the insert field, and you're going to come down to this global variable $permission, and then you'll see all the permissions which exist there. So we'll add in that one, and then you'll see they're the exact same thing. We only need one of them. And then what we're trying to do is we're trying to find, you know, people who don't have this permission should get the error message. So we want the inverse of this. So it's not permission. So if they don't have this, then the rule should fire. Whereas if they do have the bypass ability, then we should ignore the message. So let's save this. And then I'll come back into my opportunity and try and save again. And you see now I can go back to value proposition. I can close it. Again, so let me close one, come back into proposal, whichever stage I like. is the idea there. So what this then allows you to do is, you can put this this permission bypass in as many validation rules which need a bypass. You don't need to put in 100% of your validation rules, because some things should be applied to everyone. But then it means when you're doing Git testing, if you're saying, is this flow going to work? Because sometimes things will work really well, when it's running as you as the system admin, but if it ran in the user context, it might error out. But you could just come back to your permission set or your permission set group, and you could remove the bypass. So you could just quickly come into manage assignments, and you could delete that, run your tests, see if it would work for other people or not. So it's just a little bit easier that way. Or if someone's just doing a data load for one day, they only need it for a minute, you can bring them in without having to add in their profile name or the user ID and change 50 validation rules. So this way it's just a lot easier to onboard people, offboard people, do different testing. Okay, well, thanks for coming along, everyone. Hope you have a good night.